There was once an old man named Mr. Jonathan Parker. He lived in a quiet town near a river and a small forest. His house was large but peaceful. Many people in the town knew him. Mr. Parker loved paintings more than anything else in the world. When he was young, he did not have much money. He worked very hard every day. He saved every dollar he could. Whenever he traveled to another city, he always visited art galleries. He looked at beautiful paintings for many hours. Slowly, year after year, he bought more paintings. Some were small, some were large, some were painted by young artists. Some were painted by famous artists. His house slowly became full of art. People who visited his home were always amazed. They saw paintings everywhere, on the walls, above the fireplace, along the hallway. Mr. Parker was very proud of his collection, but there was something even more important in his life. He had a son. His son's name was Daniel Parker. Daniel was a kind and gentle boy. He had bright eyes and a warm smile. Daniel loved art too. When Daniel was small, he often sat beside his father and listened to him talk about paintings. Mr. Parker would say, "Look at this painting. Daniel, see the colors, see the light. A painting can tell a story." Daniel listened carefully. Sometimes Daniel tried to paint small pictures himself. They were not perfect, but his father always smiled and said, "Art is not about perfection. Art is about the heart." As Daniel grew older, he became a strong and thoughtful young man. He helped his father take care of the paintings. Sometimes they cleaned the frames together. Sometimes they talked for hours about art and life. They were not only father and son, they were also best friends. Mr. Parker often said one day, "All of this will be yours." Daniel would laugh and say, "I don't want the paintings." "Dad, I just want you," Mr. Parker would smile. But inside, he felt very proud of his son. Daniel had a good heart. Then, one day, everything changed. War began in their country. Young men everywhere joined the army. Daniel knew he must go too. The night before he left, he sat with his father in the living room. They looked at the paintings on the wall. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Daniel said softly, "Don't worry about me." "Dad," Mr. Parker nodded slowly, but his heart felt heavy when the morning came. Daniel put on his army uniform. His father hugged him tightly. "Come back home safely," Mr. Parker said. "I will try," Daniel answered. Then he walked away. Mr. Parker stood in the doorway and watched his son disappear down the road. The house suddenly felt very empty. Weeks passed, then months. Sometimes letters arrived from Daniel. In his letters, he wrote about his friends in the army. He wrote about the cold nights. He wrote about the fear and danger. But he also wrote about hope In one letter, he said, "Dad, I remember the paintings in our house. When I close my eyes, I can see them clearly. They help me stay strong. Mr. Parker, read every letter many times." He kept them in a small wooden box beside his bed. But one day, a different letter arrived. It came from the army. The letter said, Daniel was missing in action. Mr. Parker felt as if his heart had stopped. Missing, no one knew where Daniel was. No one knew if he was alive. Days felt like years. Mr. Parker could not sleep. He walked through the house every night. He looked at the paintings but could not enjoy them anymore. Without Daniel, they meant nothing. A few weeks later, another letter arrived. Mr. Parker held the letter with shaking hands. Slowly, he opened it. Inside was terrible news. Daniel had died. Mr. Parker sat down and cried. It felt as if half of his soul had disappeared, but the letter continued. It explained what happened during a battle. Many soldiers were wounded. Daniel had already reached a safe place, but he saw his friends still on the battlefield. They were hurt. They could not move. Daniel went back. Again and again, he ran into danger. Each time, he carried a wounded soldier to safety. 1, 2, 3, 4. Finally, he carried the last soldier, but just before reaching safety, a bullet hit him. Daniel fell to the ground. He died while saving his friend. When Mr. Parker finished reading the letter, tears filled his eyes. His son had died. But his son had died as a hero. A month later, Christmas arrived. But there was no joy in the house. Mr. Parker did not decorate the tree. He did not play music. He simply sat quietly in the living room. Then, suddenly, the doorbell rang. Mr. Parker slowly walked to the door. Outside stood a young man. He held a large package in his hands. The young man looked nervous. "Sir," he said softly, "you don't know me, Mr." Parker nodded. The young man continued, "My name is Thomas Reed. I was a soldier with your son, Mr." Parker's eyes widened. Thomas spoke again. "I am the man your son saved." Tears came to Mr. Parker's eyes. Thomas held up the package. "I am not rich," he said. "I cannot repay what your son did for me." He paused. "Your son told me that you love paintings, Mr." Parker nodded slowly. "So, I tried to paint something for you, Mr." Parker opened the package. Inside was a portrait. It was a painting of Daniel. The painting was simple. Thomas was not a professional artist, but the painting showed Daniel's warm smile. It showed his brave eyes. Mr. Parker stared at the portrait. Tears ran down his face. He gently placed the painting above the fireplace. Then he turned to Thomas. "This is the most valuable painting I own," he said. Thomas looked surprised. "But sir, it is not very good." Mr. Parker shook his head. It is perfect. Thomas stayed with Mr. Parker. That Christmas, they talked about Daniel. They laughed, they cried after that day. The portrait of Daniel stayed above the fireplace. More important than all the famous paintings. Years passed. Mr. Parker became older. His health became weaker. One winter, he became very sick. Soon after, he passed away. News spread quickly. Mr. Parker's art collection was famous. Many collectors wanted his paintings. Soon, an auction was organized. People came from many cities. Art collectors, museum directors, wealthy buyers. The room was full. Everyone was excited. The auctioneer stood up. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "thank you for coming." Everyone waited eagerly. They expected the famous paintings first, but the auctioneer pointed to a simple painting. It was the portrait of Daniel. Someone in the crowd shouted, "That is only the old man's son. Start with the real paintings." But the auctioneer shook his head. "We begin with this one," he called out. "Who will buy this painting for $100? Silence. He tried again. $50. Still silence. $40. No one answered. Then an old man stood up. He was a poor neighbor. "I only have $10, he said. I knew the boy. I watched him grow up. He was a good boy." The auctioneer smiled. $10 going once, going twice, sold. The crowd cheered. Now they expected the real auction to begin. But the auctioneer raised his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "the auction is finished." The crowd shouted angrily, "What do you mean, finished? There are many famous paintings here." The auctioneer held up a paper. "This is Mr. Parker's will." He read it aloud. "Whoever takes the portrait of my son receives all the other paintings." The room became silent. The poor neighbor looked shocked. He now owned every painting in the house. Not because he was rich, but because he loved the son. Mr. Parker knew something important. The world loved art, but he loved his son more than anything, and the neighbor understood that love. The greatest treasure was never the paintings. The greatest treasure was the heart of a brave son. Daniel gave his life to save his friends, and his father gave everything to honor him. Because love is always worth more than gold, and sometimes the most valuable portrait is not the one painted by a famous artist. It is the one that reminds us of a hero we will never forget.